Have you ever wondered why tithing is such a controversial topic in the church? You've heard pastors say, "Give your 10% and God will bless you." You've seen sermons promising financial breakthroughs if you tithe faithfully. But what if I told you there are 3 biblical secrets about tithing that most churches never teach? Secrets that could change the way you see giving. Secrets hidden in the very scriptures we read. And secrets that could unlock a whole new level of understanding about God's financial system. By the time you finish this video, you'll know the truth about tithing, what the Bible really says, what most churches won't tell you, and how you can apply these hidden principles to your life for true biblical prosperity. So, let's dive in. Secret number 1. Most people today associate tithing with money. Every Sunday, churchgoers are told to give 10% of their income, usually in cash, check, or digital transfers. But here's the first hidden truth. Biblical tithing was never just about money. Let's go back to where tithing first appeared in the Bible. The first time we see tithing in the Bible is in Genesis 14 verses 18 to 20 when Abraham gave a tithe to Melchizedek. But notice something interesting. Abraham didn't tithe from his regular income. He tithed from the spoils of war. And he gave him 1/10 of everything. Genesis 14 verse 20. Abraham's tithe wasn't about fulfilling a law, it was an act of honor. This means tithing, in its purest form, was never meant to be a legal requirement, but an act of worship and gratitude. Fast forward to the time of Moses. In Leviticus 27 verse 30, God commanded the Israelites to tithe. A tithe of everything from the land, whether grain from the soil or fruit from the trees, belongs to the Lord. It is holy to the Lord. Notice something. The tithe was from the land, grains, fruits, and livestock, not from their paycheck. In fact, money was rarely used in tithing in the Old Testament. Why does this matter? Because many churches today focus on monetary giving while ignoring the deeper biblical principle. Tithing was about provision, not just payment. Some churches insist that Jesus affirmed the 10% tithe. They often quote Matthew 23 verse 23, where Jesus told the Pharisees, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give 1/10 of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin. But you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness." But Jesus wasn't reinforcing the tithe. He was rebuking them. He was saying, "You focus so much on tithing but forget what truly matters, justice, mercy, and faith." This brings us to an important question. If tithing wasn't always about money, what is its true purpose? We'll get to that in the next secret. But before we do, here's a question for you. Have you ever been taught that tithing was more than just money? Let me know in the comments. Secret number 2. Most churches today emphasize the 10% rule. Give God 10% of your income, and He will bless the rest. But did you know that the biblical tithe was never just 10%? Let's break this down. The 3 tithes of the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, there wasn't just one tithe. There were actually 3. 1. The Levitical tithe, Numbers 18:21-24. This was the standard 10% tithe given to the Levites, who served in the temple and had no inheritance of land. 2. The festival tithe, Deuteronomy 14 verses 22-27. Every year, the Israelites set aside another 10% to celebrate feasts and festivals before the Lord. 3. The poor tithe, Deuteronomy 14 verses 28 to 29. Every third year, the Israelites gave an additional 10% to care for the poor, widows, and orphans. When you add these up, Israelites didn't just give 10%, they gave around 23 to 30% of their income. Yet today, most churches teach only one tithe, the Levitical tithe, without mentioning the others. New Testament giving, beyond percentages. Now, some might argue, well, that was the Old Testament. What about the New Testament? The New Testament never commands a 10% tithe. Instead, it teaches generous, Spirit-led giving. Look at how the early church gave in Acts 2, verses 44 to 45. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. They didn't just give 10%, some gave everything. Then, in 2 Corinthians 9 verse 7, Paul wrote, "Each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver." Notice the difference. The Old Testament was about percentages. The New Testament is about the heart. This means that New Testament giving isn't about meeting a quota. It's about generosity, love, and faith. But why is this important? Because many people today feel guilty or pressured into tithing, when in reality, God cares more about the heart behind your giving than the amount you give. This leads us to the biggest secret of all, the true purpose of tithing. Secret number 3. If tithing was never just about money, and if it wasn't limited to 10%, then what was its true purpose? Most churches teach that tithing is about supporting the church, paying the pastor's salary, covering church expenses, and funding missions. While there's nothing wrong with supporting a church, that's not the original purpose of tithing. Tithing was about honoring God and helping others. The main purpose of tithing in the Bible was twofold. 1. To honor God with the first and best of what He provided. Proverbs 3 verses 9 to 10. 2. To take care of those in need, the Levites, widows, orphans, and the poor. Deuteronomy 14 verses 28 to 29. That means biblical tithing was less about funding an institution and more about worshiping God and helping people. Jesus shifted the focus from tithing to generosity. Jesus never commanded His disciples to tithe, but He constantly taught about giving generously. In Luke 6 verse 38, He said, "Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together and running over, will be poured into your lap." Jesus didn't say, "Tithe, and you'll be blessed." He said, "Give." And what kind of giving did He emphasize? Giving to the poor, Matthew 19 verse 21. Giving secretly, not for show, Matthew 6 verses 3 to 4. Giving without expecting anything in return, Luke 6 verse 35. This means that if we truly want to follow Jesus' teachings, our focus should not be on tithing percentages, but on living a generous life. What does this mean for you? So, what should you do with this information? Should you stop tithing altogether? Not necessarily. Instead of following a legalistic approach, here's what you can do. 1. Give with a joyful heart, not out of guilt or obligation. 2. Support those in need, not just church buildings. 3. Seek God's guidance on how much and where to give. Because at the end of the day, God isn't looking for your money. He's looking for your heart. We've uncovered 3 powerful secrets today. 1. Tithing was never just about money. 2. Tithing was more than 10%. It was about generosity. 3. The true purpose of tithing was to honor God and help people. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been taught these biblical truths about tithing? Do you believe churches should teach more about generosity instead of just percentages? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you found this video eye-opening, make sure to subscribe for more powerful biblical insights. And remember, God doesn't just bless tithers. He blesses cheerful givers.